Thank you everyone for joining me today and welcome to the Multicultural Queensland Month podcast produced by Radio 4EB in Brisbane. I'm Dr. Eduardo Jordan and I am the newsroom coordinator and the executive producer of the radio program The Wire produced at 4EB and in another 4 community radio stations across Australia. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we're producing, the Turrbal and Jagera countries, and also I would like to pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past, present, and emerging. So today we have 2 fantastic guests today, and we will be talking about representation matters, diversity and inclusion in the Queensland's media landscape. So first of all, I would like to introduce to Jenae Tien. Welcome, Jenae.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have the fantastic George Nyamuzinga. Welcome, George.
Hello, thank you very much.
No worries. So first of all, I would like you to introduce to the audience out there. So Jenae, if you would like to start a little bit of what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, so I've worked in media for 5 years now, predominantly for the ABC. I've also started with community radio and also worked when I was in Los Angeles working with inner city kids, bringing them arts and resources through the music industry and doing things with interview hosting and media there for a not-for-profit. So I've loved talking to people for many, many years now, and everything that I've ever worked on and done has had diversity and inclusion lens through it, because I think it's super important to elevate the marginalized voices. And now that I'm working and living in Australia again, it's important to reflect on modern Australia. So I've been loving working as a multimedia producer and working with lots of different communities. And I also have a business called Expand Your Library. And our whole focus there is to talk about the importance of diverse books and resources within the education system, and diversifying the resources we're asking our children to learn from. And we also have an educational resource called Deck of Diversity, which helps parents, educators, and children ease into the conversation around diversity and inclusion in an age-appropriate way. So everything I do all the time, whether it's personal or professional, always has that focus of DEI and B even, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So it's a real passion of mine.
Fantastic, thank you, Jenae. And George, what about you? What do you do? What do you do in the media sector?
Okay, so I am the president of the Queensland African Arts and Culture Association, known as QACA. So basically, most of my time I've been interviewing mostly people from my cultural background, so be it musicians, influential people, and everything else. And I've created a podcast, which can be found on YouTube and many social medias, which is called the Ghetto Fire Media. So mostly what we have tried to do is to not only encourage artists and bring them to a whole wider audience so that people can see their work. And then when I talk of artists, I'm talking of either musicians, painters, novel writers, actors, and everybody else. Since our community is very small and really it's very hard for it to get into the mainstream media, we just decided to start creating our own in the background so that we can create awareness to people so that they can see what our artists actually do and what they are very good at. So basically, I create awareness of African artists to Africans and trying our best to break into the mainstream media so that we can also introduce our artists into the mainstream media. Beside that, the work we do with African Arts in Queensland Association, beside the interviews, awareness, and whatever is going on in our small community, we are also involved in helping settling of most Africans which were coming to our shows, be it refugees, students, workers, and anybody else. So we look at challenges they are facing, and then we mitigate those challenges to try to help them to find the best way out to settle comfortably and to integrate into the Australian community.
Fantastic, very impressive curriculum from both of you. Thank you so much for accepting doing this podcast. We really appreciate it. So as you know, this is called Representation Matters, Diversity and Inclusion in Queensland's Media Landscape. And we will be delving into the crucial role of mainstream media and commercial media in promoting inclusivity and accurately representing the diverse voices and faces of the Queensland multicultural community. So my first question, whoever wants to answer first, why is it essential for Queensland's media landscape to prioritize diversity and inclusion in its representation of communities and cultures?
George, did you want to go first on that one?
Look, I think inclusion and diversity. I mean, first thing first, when these words are always thrown around, you know, and most people don't even really know what they mean, and most people normally just throw these words around as a badge, you know, and people just say, look, we've got inclusion and diversity within a certain system, but not really understanding what they really stand for, what to include or what is diversity at all within, you know, the Queensland. So to answer that question, firstly, Queensland. It's one of the most growing communities, probably in Australia and probably in the world. Everybody is moving to Queensland. Everybody, you know, because of certain situations that happen, be it natural disasters, I don't know, I'm not an economist, but I know there are certain factors which are pulling people to Queensland. So it is very important to notice that most people being put into the Queensland society are diverse people. You know, we are looking at I think the government has just had a huge campaign of getting workers from other countries because, you know, they were lacking in those areas, and most of these workers are foreigners. You know, they are not Australians. So if you look at most people being inducted into the Australian community, whether be it in other states or Victoria or New South Wales, you look that most people who are coming into the Australian community right now are mostly of different backgrounds. You see, be it Asians, Africans, people from the islands. So I think it is very important to recognize that Queensland itself is becoming more diverse. It's becoming more and more diverse. And as of before, when it was okay that most of these minority cultures was just so little that it was insignificant. But right now, if you look at it, there's more diverse cultures. So the importance of this is to cater for its original citizens, you know, because you see, media is everything. Media is everything. Media is communication. Media is awareness. Media is be it you read a magazine, or be it you're on social media, or be it you're going into the news. It's awareness to a certain community which is now so diverse with a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different priorities. So I feel it is very, 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 very important for the landscape to at least change towards recognizing that a lot has changed, instead of maintaining the old system which was there, which is, to be honest with you, is not really changed. And thank God of the internet, you know, the cyber revolution, that most of these minority groups have started creating their own media platforms and their own media content to the world. So I feel it is very important for the governments and everybody else involved in the policymakers to start looking at the way now Queensland stands. It's now a different story as it was 5 years ago. It's now a different story as it was 10 years, 15 years ago, which the mainstream media, to be honest with you, as I said before, has not changed. You know, there's not much inclusion of other groups, be it, you know, Asians, Africans, or islanders. It hasn't changed. It's still the same. So I feel that's a bit of a big lack on the policymakers, from the people who actually create these laws to govern and create some of these things. So that's why I say I feel it is important for that inclusion, because simple, the society has changed, and there is a lot of people who are now of different cultures, of different heritage and different backgrounds, and to disperse information to them, I think it's much better to include media personalities from these cultures, and they can help disperse and even create certain dialogues which can help the society to integrate into each other together peacefully. Yeah.
Jenae?
Absolutely, George. I completely agree with what you were saying. And like you said, Queensland is very diverse. Australia, out of the 22 million people, give or take, that live here, 1 in 4 people were born overseas. 46% of people have at least one parent that was born overseas. 20% of people speak another language at home. So it's very multicultural here. And we do have, I take my responsibility with working within the media very seriously about how we are representing modern Australia. When I first started in the media industry, all of my mentors, all of my leaders, bosses, people who are training, my colleagues were all, white Australians, and they were wonderful and fantastic and gave me all the skills I needed. But it was quite a lonely journey of trying to figure out where's my place here within the media. And then when you're pitching stories that you think are important and of worth, that represent other multicultural communities or other diverse communities, sometimes you feel like you're very much alone on that journey. So I think it's really important that the media understands the severity of the situation of what it means if you're not having that representation, and not just representation, positive representation. We need to see positive stories reflected within the media. It cannot always be going to certain communities when something negative happens, because that creates misunderstanding, increases stereotypes and biases, and we want to eliminate all of that. And by diversifying media, it creates understanding, common ground, connection, and inspiration. And what I mean by inspiration is, I've got young kids, George, you've got young children. It's like we want them to know that they belong here in society, that their stories, their voice matters, and that even one day maybe they can work in the media industry and make a difference. My daughter always says to me, "Mommy, I'm going to be a journalist." I don't tell her what I've had to endure and how, the complexities within the industry, but I hope by the time she's able to be a journalist, there's a lot more diversity, and she doesn't even, like, her skin color or her cultural background is not even a barrier, but that's something that I think it goes both ways. It's not just the stories that we tell, it's the stories that we're not telling. And by not telling those stories, it eliminates people in our community to feel like that they don't belong or that their stories aren't important. So it's vital we get it right.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important, and perfect points on both sides here with George and you, Jenae. As a personal experience, when I came from Mexico, I started studying here in Queensland. I had the opportunity to speak with one of the news editors from like a commercial radio station, and he was giving this speech about how to make it into radio, etc. And I asked him, "Oh, look, can you give me extra tips?" I knew from the beginning that I was going to struggle 3 times more than a regular Australian, just because of the accent, just because of the cultural background, and just because I was not used to the all full Australian experience, I guess. And basically he mentioned, well, you're not going to make it to radio because of your accent. You have a very strong accent and no one will understand you on radio. And look at me, I'm producing radio. Exactly. So,
yeah.
And that's the thing, right? It's like, even if society says, no, you don't belong here, whether it's physically, verbally, or whether it's just by not having you represented, that plays on your mind. And I remember the moment I saw Karina Cavallo on the news presenting with her brown skin and curly hair, and I was like, wow, I have just wasted so many years of choosing to be in radio in production in the background because I was thinking that I was never going to make it on TV as a news presenter, and like, how ridiculous. So those comments, I'm so glad, Eduardo, that you are in radio and that you didn't let that stop you from doing what you want to do,
And as well, what you mentioned, I mean, having really good mentors and good and effective allies that supports your path, and they're encouraging you to be in the media. It's just fantastic, and I had that opportunity, so I understand and I acknowledge not everyone has those, but it's small steps, I guess.
Yes.
Excellent.
So you see, Eduardo, like what you are saying, like, one thing, I think someone once said, a pen is mightier than a sword, okay? Media, it can be a very big weapon. You understand this? It can be one of the greatest weapons, and it can also be one of your greatest allies, you see, because at the end is, you know, people have misunderstanding on certain groups, like, you know, what you were told that you're never going to make it to radio, because whoever was telling you that doesn't mean he was wrong, okay? It's only that he understands his community and society much better. So he was coming from the perspective of his own community, which he's used to, you understand? But that doesn't mean that it applies to the rest of the communities around him. He just didn't have time to understand and to integrate the communities around him, which is the main cause or the main purpose of what we are trying to do here. See, this misunderstanding among cultures, which then extend into political and economic issues, is because most Australians have got a misconception of these societies that have come to their shores. You know, they don't understand. So I feel integration and diversity into this media community, it helps people alleviate, you know, fear, unknown bias, or even being told that you cannot do this, you cannot do this, because in your community, Eduardo, someone will listen to you. If you're on radio, you know, you understand, someone is going to listen to you. Someone will be like, Eduardo is on radio, and they feel close to you. And even the other Australians will be like, I like that guy. I like how he sounds. You know, accent is something which is, you know, I don't know, to some, it can be fear. To some, it can be something pleasant. So on that, and why it is very important for this inclusion, man, is because some of the political and economic issues we go through in Australia can easily be addressed, because at least you have someone in either a policymaker or a TV representative or a producer who can say, no, wait a minute, guys, this is misunderstood. You don't understand. Imagine if you've got a newsroom with full of Australians and something has to be spoken about. They're speaking about South Americans. None of them has ever been to South America. You know, they don't understand South American culture or food or whatever, or what's going on at that time of time. So there's always that bias. And I'm not saying it's their fault, it's just that they don't know. So us as, you know, multicultural people who came into these shows should also be able to voice and push to say, you know what, wait a minute, this is how it works, or this is how it stands, like, if you understand what I mean.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with you, George. Yeah. And yeah, it's one of those things, like you said, it's like a double-edged sword to be in the media, and you know, and it's also a big opportunity for people in executive positions to realize that diversity is here to stay. So I completely agree with you. So I'm going to go with Jenae now. Can you share an example of a media portrayal that positively impacted a specific community in Queensland? And how do you think such representations can be encouraged further?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a few things. The first is one of my roles when I worked in radio was community and content and engagement producer, where I would do a lot of diversity stuff, but I get to engage with communities to create content. And we had an award show called Community Spirit Awards, and the previous year, you know, we had some diversity, but it probably definitely could have been improved. And so this year, you know, I was in charge of kind of coordinating the event, and I really wanted to work with the teams to make sure we're pushing out to as many cultural background, you know, many different multicultural backgrounds, many different community groups as possible. And we got an influx of amazing stories and people nominated for awards, and which was quite diverse, which was wonderful. And one of the winners was the president of the Pakistan Australian Cultural Association. And I call him a dear friend now, because from that moment, from him being able to come into the award show, which was, you know, broadcasted on radio, there was digital online stories, there was social media coverage, and there was even TV picked up on some of the stories as well. That community then was able to have a platform to tell their stories, and their stories were, you know, raising funds for people who were ill and helping people back home and doing amazing things that we wouldn't know about if it wasn't for this award show, because for some reason those stories aren't as picked up as they should be. And basically that community now has a direct line to us, and we have a direct line to them. And the reason why I was positively impactful is because from there, We took it to have dinner with them. We broke bread. We got to engage with their community members. They got to engage with us as media professionals and really get to know each other. And I distinctly remember the president saying, he said, you know, PACA, the Pakistan Australian Cultural Association, has been around for this many years, the ABC has been around for this many years, and this is the first time ever that we've come together, and now we have an actual partnership, and we feel safe to tell our stories to you, and we want, you know, we know that you want to represent us positively. Does that mean that every story that they pitch goes on air? Absolutely not. But it means that if something's happening in that community, we have a direct line, and no misunderstanding will happen. And I think that's really important to understand, that those connections are vital for eliminating misunderstandings or representing the story wrong, or like George was mentioning, understanding the importance of knowing, because if you don't know anything about the Pakistan community, you're just going to write whatever, and that could be really damaging to their community. So building those relationships and maintaining those relationships is really great. So that was one instance. And the other instance was just recently, the other day, for the FIFA World Cup. I don't know if y'all saw on the TV, it was when Nigeria was playing Ireland. There was this lady who was on the news. Her name was Sharon, and she was amazing. They had the drums out. They had the Nigerian community members were out, and it was so positive. And she got on there and was like, you know, it's all about women in sport. We love our community. We love being Australian. We love being here. We love our culture. And I was just thinking, wow, like she just gave me, from her, you know, 3-minute interview, so much energy and excitement and happiness. And if only we could have more multicultural stories and, you know, diversity within our community like that, where you get little glimpses, people's community members that, like George says, removes fear and lack of understanding, and just connection to sport in that case, which was the soccer, instead of only going to certain communities if and when something bad happens. You know, we should be doing more to normalize the voices that we of modern Australians. So yeah, I think those are the examples that have come to mind. And I hope that, well, I know that the president of the Pakistan Australian Cultural Association feels that that was a good connection and it's been good for his community. But I wish we could do more of that.
Very interesting and very inspirational, that, Jenae. Thank you for that. George, would you like to share an example about how representations can be encouraged further?
Eduardo, I wish I can, but I'm gonna be on this. I'm gonna tell you the truth, Eduardo. Like from my cultural background, I don't think we have been represented positively in the media at all. You see, what she was saying, what Jenae was saying is, we like the World Cup. Yes, was it amazing for Africans? Yes, it was amazing. This is the first time the World Cup has been held in Australia, and we cannot have situations where we can only be represented once in 10 years there and there. You know, once for a while we can mention minority groups and all sorts of stuff. That doesn't work, to be honest with you. Yes. In my cultural background, I can tell you certain instances which we can pick from, one or two. You know, there's the group Hello Africa. I don't know if you know Hello Africa. They are dancers, drummers. Sunday Ali, one of the guys who choreographs there. And this group has been represented well, to be honest, in media, to be honest with you. I've seen them on the morning shows and all these shows, and also showing the importance of African culture and dance, the energetic talents we actually have. My problem is, I know probably this question is coming on the next question, is this representation enough? No, because look at it this way, man. If I tell you how many times Africans have been either reported negatively in the media, and then if you look at how much talent, I deal with African talent, man, be it sculptors, painters, and everybody, how much talent out. We've got so much talent. We've got so much African talent right now in Queensland that can actually be a very good economic factor to Queensland, you understand? But my problem is, yes, we can sit here, Eduardo, and say, yeah, we've been represented by this group, but I feel on a larger scale, yes, on a minority scale, I can pick 1 or 2 points. because somebody was probably sitting in a newsroom and saying, maybe we should, cover a little bit of diversity so that, we get the ball over the line and everybody just, yeah, let's do it. Sometimes is it being done genuinely from the heart that we really actually want diversity among, in media? I don't think so. So on a larger scale, I can say to you, Eduardo, it has been unfair to my community, which I come from. We have been represented wrong, man. We've got the Mzembe brothers. I don't know if you know about them. These are African brothers who walked across Australia. Did you know that? Gideon and his brother. No, they're African brothers who walked across Australia. Nobody said anything about it. You understand? One of the biggest actors, one of the Mzembe brothers, they are actors too, very good at what they do, man. We have, industry champions. We have economic champions. We have a lot of people doing a lot of things, and these people have never been represented. But when we, just like everybody's bound to do something wrong. Once we do wrong, man, negatively, I can tell you, yeah, we have been represented. Has it been fair? No, because if you look at how we are being represented negatively versus how we are being represented positively, I can simply say in that scale, I can simply assure you that we haven't been represented positively, to be honest. I'm talking of my group. I don't know of other groups. I'm talking of the group which I know, the group which I've been around for more than 20 years, the group which I've been around, seeing things change, shops being open, theater companies being created, music being created, man. When was the last time you ever had an African artist on radio? When? Yeah. Never. But one of the biggest track right now on radio is Rema Calm Down. He's an African artist. How it got there? It's one. But if you look at African music, man, it's Afrobeats one. It's one of the biggest music in the world. And we actually have these artists doing very well here. Some of them, they're selling their music abroad and they're actually doing well. It's not that we haven't brought them. We have brought them to wherever we thought we could bring them. What we were given in a slot was just either breadcrumbs. So to say to you that we have been represented positively, yeah, we have had the breadcrumbs. There and there we have been put on, we have been, but it has been in an unfair journey. I don't know if it makes sense.
Coming from George, and I think that's where I agree with you around normalizing the voice. So what I mean by normalizing is that it's not the breadcrumbs, it's not the once a month or on the special cultural holiday or when there's a FIFA World Cup. It's like, I've worked in radio predominantly where you have to fill like a 2-3 hour show, and you might only get out of that entire show 1 or 2 stories that would be considered multicultural, culturally diverse or whatever, but the rest of the stories are the main talent are from our Australians. And I think that's where the normalization needs to come from, building up, which we can talk more about in a moment, but building up our contact list so that when you have a story, whether it's an educator, you've got a diverse range of talent to pull from, and building those connections with community, which I was saying around the community engagement, so that if something is happening, you can pick up the phone and call someone, call George when it comes to, whatever. So I think there's a lot that can be done, which I'd like to explore more in this conversation with y'all, but I totally get where you're coming from. It is not as normalized. It's not an everyday process. It's very much here, there, and sometimes. And that's where the confusion for the younger generation comes from, because you're listening to radio, you're watching television, you're reading magazines, and the majority of what you're seeing does not reflect the reality of where we're living.
And I guess also it's probably easier for the media to portray a negative connotation of a specific community. We've seen that as well throughout the pandemic, when the lockdowns happened in Victoria, where these conservative media outlet basically attacked the South Sudanese community, saying that they were the bad guys in Melbourne, that they're going to bring a lot of issues, etc. So it looks like it's more of a lack of information and lack of community engagement, I suppose, as well, to all those communities. Or what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a lack of community engagement. I mean, if you think about it, when a crime happens, you get a police report. Easy. You can call police media, or you get a police report and you can type up your little story and you put it out there, right? You might go and figure out some talent that you go and interview, and that's that. So if something happens in a multicultural community, that's easy to report on. But going and finding positive stories when your network is quite tight-knit, that takes effort. And that takes also diversifying your team and your staff members and your management and your leadership to know, like George was saying before, hey, what about this story? You can only speak about, explore, and create ideas from within your own sphere of understanding and experiences. So if your teams are not diverse within the media industry, your stories are not going to be diverse. You're not going to be able to crack the diversity code if you don't have a diverse staff working on these things. So I definitely think that it's a lack of community engagement and understanding and diversity within the teams. It's easier to go and report a crime because it's just given to you. You can do some investigation and try to get some balance, but 9 times out of 10 people just take what the police statement and they whack it in there, and they might do another additional interview with someone else from the community, but it's not difficult compared to finding, which is what our jobs are, but finding positive stories that are diverse.
You see, it comes to my point where media is supposed to change the landscape of political, economic, and social aspects of this big community called Queensland, or this big community called Australia. As you say, man, the Sudanese, God bless those brothers and sisters of mine. They've been done bad. They've been done really, really, really bad. I'm not saying they're bad apples among themselves, but the majority of the community, man. Do you know that you've got Sudanese in the AFL? Do you know that?
No, I didn't.
You've got Sudanese playing the AFL right now, but nobody mentions that. You've got Sudanese playing in the Australian national soccer team. You've got Sudanese runners, sprinters, artists, but nobody, you don't even know about it because that's not the story we want, So media, this is where they say, the man creates fear to people. You see, so what is reported to the Australian community is the negative aspect of a certain society. Now, you have created a dangerous situation where the rest of the world is going to view that group in a negative way because that's the only thing you report. Now, if I may ask you a question, how many negative things have been reported about the Sudanese or African groups in the last 10 years compared to positive? It doesn't mean the positives are not there. If you want them, we will give you the positives, but you are not looking for it. But then when you come to it, it's human nature that humans would like to see the bad happening. You know what I mean? Like people, I don't even know this philosophy. People are interested to know if there's a war, also what happened in that war. You know what I mean? And what happened here. It's the negative aspect of the news is what is more respected, and that's what makes most of these news stations to be bigger as they are, because they report controversy. I'll give you, for example, I'm not sure about the stories in nitty-gritty details. There's this Asian guy, and I think he caught an Australian bird, and he tried to eat it. You know what I mean? And it was a big shout out. Yes, it is wrong in Australia, according to Australian laws and regulations and everything else. But to him, to his culture, it was quite normal. You understand this? So this is when we come into play as media personalities and explaining to the lawmakers, like when these people come in, you need to educate them of endangered species, endangered animals they cannot touch, because at the end, they probably don't know that they cannot even, kill a bird and eat it. In my culture, man, birds are chicken. We eat them. And most cultures in the world, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's normal. But here it's breaking the law. And this guy did not even know what he was not breaking the law. But the question is, when he appeared in the shores of Australia, was there any awareness or education to teach him about that? Of which we can provide that. because we are the cultural people. And then we can say, look, man, this is what my community has been trying to do. Like, gentlemen, you cannot do this here. You know, ladies, you cannot do this here, you know, and teach and make awareness of what is right and what is wrong. The problem is nobody is interested. Everybody is interested to see the result of doom and destruction, you know, but every story has got a process. Where did it come from? Where did it go wrong? You know, I'm not saying they are bad apples. Don't get me wrong. They are bad apples. But some of these stories can be explained. Some of these stories can be prevented in the near future if there's actually that care and integration of actually respecting that the Queensland community is no longer Australian. You understand? It is now multicultural. Once you accept that fact, then we'll probably be able to move forward.
Absolutely. No, that's a very great example of what you were saying. So thank you for that, George. We're going to move to the last question because we are running out of time. But probably I'll start with Jenae. As we strive for better representation, what initiatives or changes do you believe the media industry in Queensland can implement, or to Australia as well, can implement to ensure it genuinely reflects the diversity of the community it serves?
It's easy, but it's also a difficult one. So I feel like and it's layers to this. I think George mentioned right in the beginning, you know, we throw around the word diversity and inclusion a lot, and we have these strategies and these, like, you know, goodwill and ideas, but it's about execution. And so I feel like it's a lot about, within the media industry, it's about structuring the norm and looking at the reality. So that looks like changing your staffing and diversifying who you have on your staffing. It means actually not just having ticker box strategies, but being able to hit your KPIs and bringing in experts who can actually educate people on diversity inclusion strategies and on what that looks like and how that might work. It means reporting fairly and respectfully and equitably all the time. So Eduardo, you mentioned that within COVID, there was lots of different stories of different communities represented differently. So if one person commits, you know, when people were crossing borders and doing illegal stuff, and they were choosing to show the image for that person, but then for another culture, you know, for certain Australians, they weren't showing images, that's not equitable reporting. Make a decision. Are we showing images of everyone or are we not? Do you know what I mean? Why are we showing it of the girls, the African girls, but not of the Australian girls? Why are we doing that? So for me, I feel like we need to get really serious about our policies and bringing in experts to be able to do that. Engagement with our community members, and not just to get stories, but to actually understand the communities that we're broadcasting to and that are our consumers, and understanding what are the issues, what do they want. When we did engagement exercises where we would go out to different communities and have dinners and things like that and create relationships, every single multicultural community said to us, we just want positive representation in the media. It's not difficult. They just want to be seen and heard, and it's not a difficult task to do. So it's about prioritizing that. If you're a consumer of media, I feel like, you know, educate yourself, explore other cultures, and be okay with other cultures being the headline story or being the main talent. Share the space and think before you speak online. A lot of times I was a social media coordinator at one point, and a lot of people just get online and start just saying these horrible things because it's different from what they know, or it's fear-based, and it's hurtful. And you can also be done for defamation, so be mindful what you say online, but it's hurtful and it's unnecessary, so educate yourself. And if it truly bothers you so much, okay, fine, but do you need to comment and rip down another community about how you feel? Can you just keep that internal? So I feel like it's a lot that we can do. It's not an easy process, but I don't want people to feel like it's the too hard basket, and that no one wants to actually attack it and approach it. But like George said, if you would just bring people who live here in Queensland from the multicultural community, realize that there's so much talent out there, people who are educated, skilled, ready to learn, ready for new opportunities, and you share the space and normalize the working environment to have a multicultural working environment, you would be able to eliminate damn near all of the issues when it comes to lack of diversity in the media. The last thing I'm going to say is, when I worked in America, I never had any issues around culture or background, because my bosses and my leadership, I had women and men from lots of different cultural backgrounds who were in leadership. All of the staff on the floor from lots of different backgrounds, spoke lots of different languages, things were translated, everybody, that was fine. If we didn't get along, it was just because of personality. I have never had so many uncomfortable moments until I moved back to Australia and working within my career, because it's not diversified, because the staffing and the teams are not diversified. And you feel like you're alone on this mission, and it shouldn't be that way. So I think we really need to prioritize normalizing these stories and diversifying our staff and stop putting it off.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, George, what would you like to see implemented?
Man, it's the mentality. It's the mentality, man. Like, for me, a change of mentality. You understand? As I say, diversity is a word which is thrown around a lot, and people don't even understand what they are talking about. Okay, you can report about an Asian story, a positive Asian story. You know what I mean? As she has said, man, sometimes it's the important people in power, people who actually control these media platforms, who needs their mind changed. It's the mentality. You understand? You need to understand that Queensland or Australia is now different from what it was 10 years ago. You're still reporting to a certain group of people, but not to all the groups. You understand? So the mentality is to actually start changing your mentality to see that things have changed. Diversity is here to stay. It's not going anywhere, as you said, and it's the change of policymakers. We can scream and talk of whatever we want to talk about here, but it takes one individual, my guy, one individual to change the way he thinks and change the whole system. You understand? Because look at what she said, like most of her bosses were white Australians. And these are the policymakers. These are the guys who takes the ship to where it is supposed to go. And some of us, we are just the passengers in this ship. So if those guys don't change their mentality, and if policymakers, either government official, senators or whatever, if mentality is not changed to cater that this is now a different background and this is a different perspective of what you see. And also to actually, when reporters or whatever TV personalities and everything else, it's to start looking at your community. I'm not saying report about Asians or Africans only all the time. No, just look at your community. There's so much content. If you look at your community, all of it, instead of concentrating on what you think people want to see, because that's the problem. People don't like to see that. People don't like to hear that. People don't like that. So I feel like it's time for us to actually have a different mentality from policymakers, from the top, from TV personalities. Everybody else should have a different mentality to start understanding that this is now a different society. You understand? And by understanding that, not only it will solve issues in media, it will solve issues across all boards, whether be it economic, political, or social aspects of anything. It will be sorted when you start respecting that the society is now diverse and we need to cater for it, and we need to understand each and everybody within this society, which is very, very easy, my friend. Which is very easy, that is if people are willing. You understand? Some of these stories do make it to radio stations. Some of these stories make it to television stations. But someone is there to counter with a pen that, no, this one is not worth it, because they don't understand how important it is. You understand? It's about how important is this. To them, it's not important. But to another million people, it is important. But they don't get it. So that's the first one, man. And the second thing is also coming on the staffing. Like, diverse staffing is also important. Like, let's get everybody involved. I'm not saying just go and get everybody. There are people who are qualified. There are people who wants to see this thing move forward. And engage with those people, engage with communities, understand communities, not just on the surface, understand the culture, understand the food, understand how they work, That way you will be able to move forward and actually have a better representation of media personalities within the Queensland community.
And I think you're right, George. I think Queensland is ready. They are ready. They want to see these stories. They want to hear these stories. And I have seen that in the data, especially when I was doing social media. There was a lot of fear about putting certain stories on because of worry about negative comments and things like that. Yeah, of course, you're going to get some. But the majority of people were like, this is a fantastic story. Well done to that person doing that amazing thing. So I think we, like you said, the media landscape can, if it can change its mentality and understand that not only does Queensland want it, but they need it, and it's the reflection of our reality, I think we will be well on our way.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else you would like to add, George?
Look, man, it's nothing much. I think we've spoken most of these things, but what I would like to see, I will always come back to the very same things which I've probably seen before. Instead of trying to, to heal the wound or bandage the wound, let's look at the source of the wound, like what really happened. Okay, everything has got a story. Everyone has a story. Every situation has got a background story. And most journalists don't even research of the background story. They report whatever they are given. So I don't wish to be favored within my community or my community. I wish fairness. That's all I'm asking for, fairness. When these things are reported, can they be reported factually and in fairness? Okay. Also balancing the fact that it's not always the negative stories that come out of the Asian or African or Palestinian cultures. There's also positive stories. And let's start pushing towards those positive stories so that, because negative stories create, like, people get scared, man. To be put it blunt, Australians will get scared of people because that's how they're being reported. But because that's what they know, because that's what they've been fed. They haven't seen the other side of this, of the positive stories which are being reported. So all I'm saying is fairness and truthful, and people actually give some kind of effort to actually research to see what exactly is going on a story or on a situation.
Excellent. Jenae, is there anything else you would like to add?
It's been a really productive conversation. I think if people can continue to be okay with getting things wrong, but willing to strive to get it right, I think we'll be okay. I think, I'm always one to say that I'm not always going to get it right just because I'm a DE&I advocate, but I'm willing to go back to the drawing board and re-educate myself and acknowledge that I got it wrong and try to do better the next time. You don't know until you know. So I feel like if people can have that mentality of like trying to do the best they can and not take it personally if someone, re-educates them or checks them and says, hey, that's not how it's done, then I think we can have a bit more of a resilient community that is striving to, diversify what we see in the media, which, like George said, is a weapon. Media is very impactful, and we have to get it as right as possible. We need to be striving to do better and diversify the stories that we're hearing and seeing.
I think this conversation, it could go for hours and hours. Talking about all this.
We need part 2 of this, man. We need to finish off, man. We need
to finish with coffee. With a really good cup of coffee and discuss and fix all this, because this has been an amazing conversation that includes journalists, that includes news editors, it includes people in the media in executive positions being engaged with the community that they're living, and including more diversity in the reports, positive reporting, and including those stories within the media outlets, so it could be better represented and have a better outcome, I guess, in the reporting, whether it's audio, whether it's TV, whether it's print, all those areas. I think it's a fantastic conversation, and there's a lot to wrap it up here. So I really appreciate it. I'm really thankful for hosting this series podcast with you, Jenae and George. I really appreciate it. And we need to go and get a coffee. Absolutely.
I want to go to Red Bank Plains, George, and see your headquarters and hang out and see what you guys do. And come to 4AB as well. You
should. Like I'm always at 4AB most of the time with the rail. But yeah, look, definitely we'll invite you.
Awesome. This has been so good. It's been lovely to chat with you both.
It has been lovely chatting with you too.
No worries. Well, just saying goodbye to our listeners. Thank you so much. And we'll hear you next time.
All right. Thank you.